the Book of Boba Fett, I feel that that show had a lot of potential, but really didn't live up to it. And that the plot was just so disjointed and chaotic, it really hurt the show, which had so much promise. So the first season to me, and I expect there will be another season, but I'll get to that later, really felt as if their intention was to have three big things happen, but they didn't develop any of them enough. Really, it came in like there was the first phase, which was with the Huts, and it seemed like it was going to be a lot more of like a political intrigue type of thing. Then you had the second, which was Boba Fett preparing to fight the Pikes. Then you had the ending, which was all the stuff with Luke, Grogu, Mando, and the finale. So everything set up in the show, for the most part, does pay off. I will give the writers that. What I won't give them is that they don't develop it enough. Like the Rancor shows up in, I think it's the second episode, and we don't see them again until the final episode. We didn't see Boba build a relationship with the Rancor. Really, it was just, it almost seemed like it was introduced just so that they could solve a problem they may have already written at the end. So, getting back to the first part, the first two episodes were really, really good, in my opinion. And the way they set the show up, I thought the show was going to be much more focused on Boba building his allies. We're going to look at his past, look at people he's worked with before, watch him basically build his own criminal empire from his own allies and friends and whatever, and that we would be getting most of the story through flashbacks and him going to meet with them and, building those people, recruiting crime families, all of that. But we didn't get that. Instead, we got a tiny crew. And now I did really like the point and the stuff with the Tuscan Raiders. That I actually cried when they died. So that was really, really sad to me anyway. And they did do a really good job with the Tuscan stuff, setting it up and paying it off. But that was, I feel, all they did that was set up well and paid off well. Because through the entire first two episodes, we're following one plot line. And then, out of nowhere, the Huts relinquish their claim to Jabba's territory and instead say, "Oh, we're gonna give up on this. We recommend you do the same." And then the Pikes show up. I'm like, okay, fine. They needed to really, I think, develop the first section, the first arc of the first season more, but they didn't. So it kind of came out of nowhere, but I was like, all right, fine, I'll go with it. And then again, we get Boba trying to deal with it, and then we get the mayor fleeing, and like the middle part just felt so disjointed, disorganized, and chaotic. Like they had their beginning and they had their ending, but they couldn't quite figure out how to put it together. Or they had a really big thing planned out, and instead of doing the whole thing, they just cut pieces out, which left it feeling very disjointed and very incomplete. Now, don't get me wrong, love the show. It was really, really good, but something about the writing was just really off to me. And including, and I'll get to this more later, but the ending, the dialogue just felt off. Anyway, back onto the first part. We, at least the vibe I got from the first two episodes was that, we get Boba building up his army, as I think I've said before, and then in the finale, we would get this big confrontation that resulted in him not outright defeating the Huts, but dealing enough of a hassle that it just wasn't worth it at that point. That, I feel, would have been a full, complete season. And the advantage to that kind of structure is Boba Fett isn't a character that has a lot about him. He's relatively basic. He's more of an idea, something fans can project onto. And as such, I think it was a bad idea to give him a whole show. But regardless, show was good. But at that point, if they had told it more through his backstory and him building alliances with people he already knew, I feel like the dialogue and the characters the story would have flowed a lot more naturally, simply for the fact that each of the episodes, if we consider it him bringing in a new ally, would be focused more on that individual with Boba Fett as the catalyst. So it's all centered around him without him and his character having to carry the plot and dialogue of the show. Because unfortunately, the show can only focus on Boba Fett for so long before it just kind of starts to feel off. But anyway, we had that first section. Moving on to the second, I just couldn't really get my head around this. This really feels like it should have been a season 2 in and of itself, with the Hutts relinquishing control. And from what I understand of the Star Wars lore, the Hutts are the most feared criminal gang. No one messes with them. So, with the Hutts retreating or relinquishing their claim of the territory to Jabba, I feel that should have been the catalyst to then give the Pike Syndicate the balls and the motivation to kind of creep up out of the shadows and go after Boba's territory as a chance to be much more profitable. And then that could have been a whole season in and of itself of Boba noticing and the whole group noticing odd things happening and seeing that the Pike is sending, small groups at first until eventually they're mounting a full scale war. And then that would have been a good end to season 2, would have been that war where you could have tied into the finale that we already had in this season. Now, I understand why they did the Book of Boba Fett the way they did. It's kind of the show that they sacked because they're telling so much in this one time period, and there's so many moving pieces, and it's so complicated that at one point you just kind of have to push one of the shows into not being as good so that everyone knows where everyone is. Which, fine. I'm honestly, that's fine. But then the finale felt even more out of place because suddenly we jump from Boba to Mando, and then focusing on Grogu. And then the final episode, which I think was the best of the series, we get Boba fighting, we get Grogu coming back, we get Mando. And now I don't like that Luke gave Grogu the choice between Yoda's lightsaber and the gift from Mando. And I also don't like that Luke has Yoda's lightsaber when canonically it was destroyed after Order 66. So it seems even less plausible for Luke to get his hands on the lightsaber than it is for even the sequel trilogy to have Anakin's lightsaber. But whatever. I don't want to get into that now. But ultimately, when that lightsaber finds its way to Luke, it rubs me the wrong way because it's yet again where they're overwriting established canon for what feels like no reason. It's been established already in the comics that the lightsabers were burned after Order 66. And the other two that I can tell you that are really noticeable of when they did change it from established canon was the final season, the final Mandalore arc, and the start of the Bad Batch. So it changed Order 66 in the sense that for Ahsoka, it plays out slightly differently in the novel, but still very, very similar. So I'm like, you know what? It makes sense. It's the book to screen adaptation, whatever. Same thing with the Bad Batch. It does make for a much more interesting story, and it isn't a major change. It's very, very similar. So again, I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. But then I do take issue with just this feels like disregarding established canon for the sake of disregarding established canon. Like there is no internal consistency, it feels, which is quite irritating when you want to formulate and fully comprehend the plots, but when pieces get removed from the board, suddenly they're added back in, which makes it really tough to follow. Anyway, once anyway, I did like seeing the X-wing. I'm like, oh, it's obviously Luke bringing Grogu back, but I really don't like that R2 just dropped Grogu off. I don't know, because we didn't see him drop Grogu off and fly off the entire time through the end of the finale. I kept waiting for R2 to swoop in the X-Wing and just take out those droids. Because honestly, at that point, I'd forgotten about the Rancor. But regardless, it really doesn't matter because the finale was fine on its own. Could have been much, 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 much better. But again, it just comes down to it feels like things were rushed. We should have seen Boba Fett building his relationship up with the Rancor before the Rancor went into battle with him. We should, in my opinion, have seen more of the biker gang. I actually liked the biker gang, didn't like their bikes, but I liked their characters and their concepts. I kind of wish they were elaborated on more. And it just, again, they set everything up, but I don't think they worked long enough for them to have really earned the payoff that they took in the story. So ultimately, Boba Fett, it was a great show, but it feels like it was rushed or had pieces removed from it in order to get other shows out earlier. Shows that require knowledge of what happened in the Boba Fett series and kind of where people are. And the way it ends, I feel like there's going to be another season. Just it's a vibe I'm getting, the way that they set it up with him being like, oh, I'm not fit for this and whatnot. It feels like there's going to be a second season, especially since I 100% guarantee Cad Bane is still alive. The way the camera focuses on him with the beeping, it is very reminiscent to like a heartbeat to me. So I definitely would say he's still alive. And I feel we're going to get a season 2 of Boba Fett trying to find a replacement for his position that he would trust and whatnot, or building some kind of democratic government, whatever, doing whatever he's going to do. Also, side note, I half thought through the finale, like, oh, the Tuscans aren't really dead. They're going to show up and, support their boy. Sad they didn't, but anyway. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I think we're going to get a season 2, and I think Cad Bane is going to be the main antagonist. And if we don't get a season 2, I think we'll get a show focused on Cobb Vanth with Cad Bane as the antagonist. But good God, can Bane just die? I hate him so much. I hate his character so much. I just want him gone. Like, gone. I hate him. Anyway, I know this was kind of a rant, but I'll catch you next time.